Gabby Hayes finally talks about Roy Rogers. Gabby Hayes was born with the name George Francis Gabby Hayes on May 7, 1885, in a place called Stannards, New York. Hayes grew up really far away from the dusty desert roads and cowboy towns that he later acted in for movies. His early childhood years were really different from the character he played on screen later. He was the son of a man who owned a hotel, and for a while he lived a nice, comfortable middle-class life in the northeastern part of the United States. When he was a young man, Hayes showed he was naturally good at performing and telling stories, skills that would later make him one of Hollywood's most lovable actors who played supporting roles. Before he started working in movies, Hayes lived a life with many different jobs and experiences. He tried to become a professional baseball player for a short time, and even tried working as an engineer before the excitement of performing on stage pulled him toward the world of vaudeville, which was like traveling stage shows back then. He worked together with his wife, Olive E. Ireland, and they created a really successful stage act that traveled and performed all across the country during the early 1900s. Their performances mixed together comedy, music, and funny scenes, and Hayes quickly became well known for his expressive face and his natural talent for making people laugh with his timing. It wasn't until the stock market crash of 1929, which was when lots of people lost all their money, wiped out most of his savings, that he decided to take a big chance on the new and growing movie business in California, a move that would completely change his entire life forever. When he arrived in Hollywood, Hayes found regular work as a character actor during the time when movies were changing from silent films to movies with sound, called talkies. At first he showed up in small parts, often playing bad guys, bartenders, or regular town people in early Western movies. But as the 1930s went on, he started to create a special role for himself as the perfect Western sidekick, the friend who helps the hero. His change into Gabby, the bearded, grumpy but lovable old man with a good heart, happened almost by accident and wasn't really planned. Hayes himself was clean-shaven without a beard, and was a well-spoken man when he wasn't acting. But the character of Gabby, with his bushy thick beard, simple country wisdom, and his famous sayings like "Dern tootin'," caught the imagination of audiences everywhere, and people loved him. In real life, George Gabby Hayes was completely different from the messy, slow-talking, bearded old man that audiences fell in love with on the movie screen. When he wasn't on camera, Hayes was a smart, well-spoken, and perfectly neat gentleman who was well-read, had polished manners, and was always thoughtful when talking to people. But Hollywood audiences knew him best as the typical rough-looking frontier old man, always mumbling colorful sayings like "consarn it," "yar," "dern tootin'," "dadgummit," "dern persnickety female," and "young whippersnapper." His voice was made rough on purpose for comic effect, and his messy appearance became the trademark of the lovable sidekick role, a part he would come to define and represent for many generations of Western movie fans. Hayes's journey into becoming a movie legend really began between 1935 and 1939, when he took on the role of Windy Halliday, the funny, grumpy companion to the cowboy hero Hopalong Cassidy, who was played by an actor named William Boyd. As Windy, Hayes became a really important part of the Hopalong Cassidy series of movies, adding humor and emotion into the tough landscapes of the Old West. However, in 1939, an argument about how much money he should be paid led him to leave and stop working with Paramount Pictures, the movie studio. It was a risky and dangerous move for an actor who was so closely connected with just one role. But Hayes's talent and charm made sure that he didn't stay without work for very long. Soon after that, he found a new place to work at Republic Pictures, another movie studio. Since Paramount kept the rights to use the name Windy Halliday, Republic simply gave him a new name and called him Gabby Whitaker, a name that would become famous in its own way. The change was really just a small formality and didn't mean much. Gabby Whitaker was basically the same lovable, quick-witted sidekick that Hayes had perfected and gotten really good at playing, and audiences welcomed him happily with open arms. Between 1939 and 1946, Gabby Hayes appeared in more than 40 movies for Republic Pictures, making his reputation even stronger as the most beloved and favorite sidekick in Western movies. His rough charm and perfect comedic timing added more depth and warmth to the adventures of Hollywood's greatest cowboy stars. During this really productive period of making lots of films, Hayes worked alongside Roy Rogers an amazing 44 times, creating a partnership that became one of the most recognizable and famous in movie history. He also teamed up with Gene Autry in 7 different films and with Wild Bill Elliott in 14 movies, often working under the skilled direction of Joseph Kane, who directed 34 of Hayes's pictures. Beyond Republic Pictures, Gabby's talents also caught the attention of other Western movie stars as well. He appeared 6 times with the strong and reliable Randolph Scott, and no fewer than 15 times with the legendary and famous John Wayne, and not always as a funny sidekick, but sometimes as a tough, or even villainous bad guy character. One of their most memorable times working together came in Raoul Walsh's 1940 classic movie called Dark Command, where Hayes played Wayne's loyal sidekick in a film that also featured a young Roy Rogers in a smaller supporting role. The movie became a perfect showcase of Hayes's range and ability to play different types of characters, his ability to balance both humor and heroism, toughness and good-heartedness all at once. By this point in his career, Gabby Hayes had become more than just a character name. It was a beloved institution and important part of American cinema and movies. Despite being labeled as a sidekick, Hayes was very much a star in his own right and in his own way. His popularity and fame led to his own television program called The Gabby Hayes Show, which aired on TV in the early 1950s and introduced a whole new generation of young viewers to his folksy charm and country style. On the show, he presented old Western films and stories, speaking directly to children with the same warmth and humor that had made moviegoers love him for many decades. In many ways, this television work helped bridge the gap and connect classic Western cinema with the new and emerging medium of television, making sure that his influence would continue long after the best days of the Western film genre had passed. For decades and many years, fans of classic Western movies have wondered what really went on behind the scenes between the legendary Roy Rogers and his unforgettable sidekick, George Gabby Hayes. The two men shared the movie screen together in some of the most beloved and loved cowboy films of the 1930s and 1940s, forming a duo and pair that defined the golden age of Westerns. Hayes, known for his rough gray beard, country twangy voice, and comical frontier expressions and sayings, rarely talked about his working relationships in Hollywood. But in a rare and deeply personal reflection late in his life when he was older, Gabby Hayes finally broke his silence and spoke up about Roy Rogers, and what he said reveals the deep respect, admiration, and complexity that existed between the two stars. Roy was more than just a cowboy hero to the public and audiences, Hayes once said thoughtfully and carefully. He was a man who carried that same honesty and decency and goodness off the screen when he wasn't acting. What you saw in those pictures and movies, the courage, the humility, the smile that could disarm and charm the toughest outlaw and bad guy, that was all really Roy. Hayes's words captured the essence and true nature of Rogers's appeal, not only as a performer and actor, but as a human being and person. Rogers represented a kind of heroism that went beyond and transcended Hollywood. To Hayes, he wasn't just another co-star and acting partner. He was a symbol of American virtue and goodness, a man who believed in hard work, faith, and family values. Hayes went on to explain how their friendship had developed naturally and easily, despite their very different backgrounds and where they came from. "We came from opposite ends of the road in different places," he said with a chuckle and laugh. Roy was this clean-cut singing cowboy who sang songs, and I was the scruffy, messy old-timer who looked like he'd been chewing on cactus for breakfast every morning. But somehow it worked and fit together perfectly. He made the kids cheer and get excited, and I made their parents and folks laugh. Their chemistry and connection became one of the most recognizable trademarks in Western cinema and cowboy movies. Whether they were riding the dusty trails, chasing bandits and bad guys, or trading witty banter and funny jokes back and forth. The connection between Roy Rogers and Gabby Hayes felt genuine and real because it actually was genuine and real. Behind the cameras when they weren't filming, their relationship was based on and grounded in mutual respect for each other. Hayes often admired Rogers's professionalism and dedication to his work. "Roy never complained about anything," Hayes remembered and recalled. "Even when we were out in the heat, sweating through our shirts and covered in dust and dirt, he stayed cheerful and happy. He'd crack a joke or start humming a tune just to keep everyone's spirits up and mood positive." That kind of leadership and positive attitude left a lasting impression on Hayes, who had worked with countless stars and many actors during his long career. To him, Rogers stood apart and was different, not just as a performer, but as a man of good character. Yet Hayes also admitted and acknowledged the challenges of working in the fast-paced film industry, where fame could easily overshadow and get in the way of friendship. "We didn't always see eye to eye and agree on everything," he admitted honestly. "Sometimes I'd grumble and complain about the scripts, or the way the studio wanted more songs and less action and fighting. Roy would laugh and tell me, 'Gabby, the kids love the songs and music.' And he was right and correct. He always knew what the audience wanted and liked." Their occasional creative disagreements and arguments never eroded or damaged their bond and friendship. In fact, Hayes gave credit to those moments with making their partnership stronger. "He taught me patience and how to be more patient," Hayes reflected and thought back. "And I think I taught him how to have a little fun with the rough edges and not take things so seriously." When asked later in life about the legacy and lasting impact of their collaboration and work together, Hayes's tone turned sentimental and emotional. "Those pictures and movies we made, they weren't just entertainment and fun to watch," he said softly and quietly. "They gave people hope and something to believe in. The country was going through tough times and hard days, and folks needed a hero they could believe in and trust. Roy gave them that hero. I was just lucky enough to ride alongside him and be his partner." It was clear and obvious that Hayes viewed their work not as mere show business and acting, but as a contribution and gift to American culture at a moment in time when optimism and hope was sorely needed by everyone. Even after Hayes left the Roy Rogers series and stopped making those movies, he never uttered or said a bitter word or negative thing about his former partner. In fact, he continued to speak warmly and kindly of Rogers whenever he was asked about him. He treated everyone on set with respect and kindness, from the cameraman to the wrangler who handled the horses. "That's the mark and sign of a real star," Hayes said proudly and with pride. "And I'll tell you something important. When you've worked in Hollywood as long as I did for so many years, you don't forget the ones who stay true to themselves and don't change who they are." In his final years, when he was getting older, as Hayes looked back over a career that spanned and included radio, film, and television, he often mentioned Rogers as one of the finest and best men he ever worked with in his life. "Roy made me look good on screen," he joked and said with humor. "And that's no small feat or easy thing when you're a scruffy old coot like me and look the way I did." But behind the humor and jokes was real affection, a deep, enduring appreciation and thankfulness for a partnership that had captured the hearts of millions of people and fans. When asked what he would say to Roy if he could speak to him again one more time, Hayes paused and stopped for a long moment before replying and answering. "I'd thank him for the laughs and good times, the trails we rode, the songs he sang, and the friendship we shared. We might have played cowboy and sidekick roles in movies, but in my book and opinion, Roy Rogers was the real deal and the genuine article. The kind of man America could be proud of and look up to." Gabby. Hayes's heartfelt reflections and honest words finally gave fans a glimpse and peek into one of Hollywood's most cherished and beloved friendships. His words painted a portrait and picture of two men united by purpose, humor, and respect. A bond and connection that endures and lasts in every frame of film they ever shared together. And even now, long after both men have ridden into the sunset and passed away, their partnership remains and stays as one of the most beloved in Western history, a timeless reminder of loyalty, laughter, and the true spirit of the American frontier and cowboy way. Following the heartbreaking and sad death of his beloved wife, Olive E. Ireland Hayes on July 5, 1957, George Gabby Hayes entered a quiet and reflective period and time of his life. The loss deeply affected him and hurt him emotionally, as Olive had been not only his lifelong companion and wife, but also the driving force and motivation behind much of his career and success. She had managed his finances and money, negotiated contracts and deals, and stood by him and supported him through the unpredictable and uncertain world of show business. After her passing and death, Hayes found solace and comfort in familiar surroundings and places he knew, retreating to his ranch on Tuca Lake in California, a property and place that had once been a haven of laughter, friendship, and shared dreams and memories. The ranch, nestled among and located in the serene and peaceful landscapes of the San Fernando Valley, provided him with a peaceful refuge and safe place where he could be close to nature, away from the bright lights of Hollywood that had defined and shaped so much of his earlier life and career. Here, surrounded by his cherished memories and mementos and keepsakes from his film and television days, Hayes spent countless hours and lots of time reminiscing and thinking back about the golden years and best times of Western cinema and the camaraderie and friendship he shared with stars like Roy Rogers, John Wayne, and Hopalong Cassidy. By the late 1960s, however, Hayes's health began to decline and get worse. Early in 1969, he was admitted and taken to St. Joseph Hospital in Burbank, California, after suffering complications and problems from cardiovascular disease, which is heart disease. The once vigorous and energetic cowboy, who had spent decades and many years portraying and playing the rugged and hearty sidekick of the Old West, was now facing the frailty and weakness of old age. Yet, even in the hospital when he was sick, those who visited him recalled and remembered his characteristic warmth and gentle humor that he always had. Nurses and doctors described him as polite, cheerful, and grateful for the care he received and the help they gave him. Hayes often reflected and thought about his long life and career, expressing gratitude and thanks for the opportunities Hollywood had given him and for the fans who had never forgotten his contributions and what he did for the Western genre and cowboy movies. Though the illness gradually weakened him and made him more frail, he faced his condition with dignity and acceptance, much like the stoic and strong frontier characters he had brought to life on screen in his movies. On February 9, 1969, Gabby Hayes passed away peacefully at the age of 83, closing the final chapter of a life that had spanned and covered from the era of silent films to the golden age of television. His death marked the end of an era and important time for many Western enthusiasts and fans who remembered him not only as the quintessential and perfect grizzled sidekick, but also as a symbol of honesty, loyalty, and humor in a genre and type of movie that celebrated those very traits and qualities.